Tomahawk missile likely destroy that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I haven't seen it, and I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic, it's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
This channel has a general rule. It applies the same standard to everybody. Not a political position, it's an ethical one. It's the only position that makes analytical sense. When Russia bombs a hospital in Ukraine, we call it a war crime. When a school is deliberately targeted in any conflict, we call it inexcusable. When thousands of civilians die and there is no accountability, no apology, no pause, and no change, of course, we call that a pattern. This video applies the same standard to the Iran war, not because the Iranian government is innocent, it's not. And this channel will say so clearly, but because the Iranian people are not the Iranian government, and because the rules-based international order either applies to everybody or it applies to nobody. So before we go further, this video is not about whether Iran's government was a good government. It was not. It was authoritarian. It suppressed its own people. It killed thousands of protesters in January 26 and undoubtedly before. This video is about whether the response to that government met the standards we apply everywhere else. The answer is documented and it's damning. So let's give you the numbers, not from Iranian state media, not from US Central Command, from independent sources, the human rights activist news agency, NPR, Amnesty International and the UN. So the first metric, total deaths in Iran from US-Israeli strikes, 3,114 confirmed, including 1,354 civilians. The Iranians killed, Iran Health Ministry figure, more than 1,444. Iranians injured, over 18,551. Iranians displaced, up to 3.2 million. Schools damaged or destroyed, between 65 and 66. Medical facilities hit, such as hospitals and pharmacies, 32 targeted, 25 damaged, 9 out of service. Civilian sites damaged, more than 10,000. US strikes on Iranian targets since the 28th of February, more than 7,000. Iranian provinces struck, at least 26 of 31. I want to be precise about what those figures represent. The Human Rights Activists News Agency, the HRANA, is an independent organisation that has documented human rights abuses by Iranian government for years. It is not a pro-government source. When it documents 1,354 civilian deaths, that number is the conservative estimate from a source with every reason to be cautious. The 10,000 civilian sites damage figure is from the Iranian Red Crescent, not state media. The UNHCR 3.2 million displaced figure is from the United Nations. These are not propaganda numbers, they are the documented record. Next I want to talk about Minab, the school that should have changed everything. On the 28th of February 2026, the very first day of the war, a girls' elementary school in Minab in southern Iran was destroyed. The Sharare Tayyabe school, between 175 and 180 people were killed. Most of them were school children. This is the deadliest single strike on civilians in the entire conflict so far. Investigations by the New York Times, BBC Verify, NPR and CBC all concluded the United States was likely responsible. Amnesty International's analysis found that a US-manufactured Tomahawk missile was likely used. Tomahawk missiles are used exclusively by US forces in this conflict. The school had been separated from the adjacent IRGC compound since at least 2016. Amnesty International noted that investigators were able to verify this within days using publicly available satellite imagery. The US military, with significantly more advanced intelligence capabilities, was undoubtedly in a position to know. The response: UNESCO condemned the strike as a grave violation of humanitarian law on the day of the attack. The UN Secretary General condemned it. UNICEF called for the protection of civilians. 46 US senators demanded accountability. The US response? Pete Hegseth, US Defense Secretary. What they said? Evaded questions, said the US was investigating and would never target civilian targets. Next, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, said the US was investigating, no further statement issued. And Donald Trump said the attack was done by Iran. because they're very inaccurate with their munitions and have no accuracy whatsoever. Next, the White House spokesman confirmed investigations ongoing, said the Department of Defense would release a full report. The Pentagon report, no conclusion published as of the 19th of March 2026. Internal sources told NYT the preliminary findings pointed to the US. And then Israel, an IDF spokesperson said Israel did not know who was responsible and was not aware of any IDF operation in that region. 3 weeks after a school was destroyed, killing up to 180 people, mostly children, on the first day of the war, there's been no apology, no acknowledgement of responsibility, no public change of targeting procedure, and no independent investigation. The President of the United States blamed the country being bombed for bombing its own school. It was done by Iran because they're very inaccurate with their munitions, have no accuracy whatsoever. Quote by Donald Trump, 7th of March. Quick comment on the standards that we apply on this channel. When Russia hit Mariupol Maternity Hospital in 2022, the world correctly called it a war crime. The ICRC, UN and every Western government condemned it. Russia denied responsibility and blamed Ukraine. We correctly identified the denial as an aggravating factor, not a mitigating one. The same standard applied here. Okay, so next I'm going to look at the men behind the war, Project 2025 and Iran. Nothing about this war happened by accident. The plan was written down in public in a 920-page document published by the Heritage Foundation in April 2023, Project 2025, the blueprint for Trump's second term, and dedicated a chapter to Iran. On page 180, the Heritage Foundation states that the Islamic Republic of Iran is at its weakest state in its history and recommends the US to take this opportunity for regime change. On page 185, it urges the US to support and encourage a revolt by Iranians against their government and to provide military support for Israel's attacks. So the Project 2025 recommendation, Iran is at its weakest, use this opportunity for regime change, page 180. What happened? The US and Israel launched strikes on the 28th of February 2026. Supreme Leader Khamenei killed on day one. The recommendation, support and encourage a revolt by Iranians against their government, page 185. What happened? January 2026, Iranian security forces killed thousands of protesters during the largest protests since the Islamic Revolution. Trump threatened military action, citing the killings as justification. The recommendation, provide military support for Israel's attacks against Iran, page 185. What happened? Joint US and Israeli operation. US conducted more than 7,000 strikes. Israel conducted parallel strikes, including the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran. The recommendation, denigrate diplomacy and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Advocate confrontation. What happened? Indirect US-Iran talks in early 26 yielded no breakthrough. War launched without UN mandate or congressional authorization. The recommendation, Heritage Foundation projected regime change could drive oil below $50 a barrel. What happened? Iranian oil reserves, 209 billion barrels, among the world's largest. Heritage's energy dominance framework, control, not just price. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a publicly available document written by people now running the US government. Newsweek noted in February 2026 that Trump had gone further than Project 25 explicitly recommended. The document urged pressure and regime change support, but stopped short of calling for direct military strikes. What happened on the 28th of February 2026 went beyond the plan, in scope, in speed, and civilian cost. J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to the Heritage Foundation President's book. The Heritage Foundation President seeing his role as institutionalizing Trumpism. The think tank that projected regime change in Iran would cut oil prices is the same institution that wrote the policy manual for the administration that launched the war. The people dying in Minab, in Tehran, in 26 of Iran's 31 provinces, they are not the Iranian government. The same government that killed thousands of them in 2026. The same government that suppressed them for decades. The Project 2025 document says the US should encourage a revolt by Iranians. It did not say the US should bomb their schools and their hospitals while encouraging that revolt. There is no protection in the plan for the people the plan claims to be liberating. In the next part, I'll talk about the world silence and what it means. I'm going to compare the international response to this war with the international response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. First, I'm going to look at the UN General Assembly condemnation vote. In terms of Russia and Ukraine, 141 countries condemned Russia in February 2022. In terms of the Iranian war, no comparable vote initiated, and the US would veto any Security Council resolution. The NATO response. In terms of Ukraine, immediate collective solidarity, Article 5 discussions. In terms of Iran, there's a split. France, Germany, Spain refuse offensive participation, UK defensive only, no NATO consensus. In terms of Western government condemnation of civilian casualties, in terms of Ukraine, it was immediate and repeated. Hospital strikes condemned within hours, and in Iran, largely absent. UK, France, Germany focused on defensive posture rather than civilian accountability. In terms of international criminal accountability, in terms of Ukraine, ICC issued an arrest warrant for Putin. And for Iran, no ICC process initiated for school strike or any other civilian infrastructure attacks. In terms of media framing, Russian denial of hospital strikes widely reported as dishonest. But in Iran, Trump's claim that Iran bombed its own school widely reported alongside counter-evidence, framed as contested rather than dishonest. In terms of economic consequences for the aggressor, in terms of Ukraine, sanctions within days, swift exclusions, asset freezes. But for Iran, Russian oil sanctions lifted by Trump February 2026, while the Iran war ongoing, and no known sanctions on the US or Israel from the rest of the world. The silence of the world, including this channel's own government in London, is not neutrality. Silence in the face of documented civilian casualties while continuing to support the choice that will be recorded. This channel has covered the Starmer government's position on Iran in detail. Starmer said Britain would not be drawn into the wider war. That is credit worth giving. But there has been no formal statement from the British government on the Minab school strike. No demand for an independent investigation. No condemnation of the response, or lack of one. So in conclusion, this video is not about whether Iran's government deserves to be challenged. It did. It was authoritarian. It was killing its own people. It was possibly building towards nuclear capacity. This video is about something simpler. It's about whether the standards we claim to hold are applied to this war, and the answer is no. A girls' school was destroyed on day one. 175 to 180 people killed, mostly children. The president of the country most likely responsible blamed the country being bombed for bombing its own school. 3 weeks later, there is no apology, no accountability, no change of course. More than 3,000 people are dead. Over 10,000 civilian sites have been damaged. 3.2 million people have been displaced. The Straits of Hormuz is closed and the people living under it have no more say than the children of Minab had in the location of the IRGC compound next to their school. The rules-based international order was not built for enemies. It was built because even in war, there are things you do not do. A school is one of them. An apology is the minimum. 3 weeks of silence is not an investigation. It's a policy. This channel applies the same standard to everybody. This is not a political position. It is the only position that means anything. If the rules apply everywhere, they apply here. If they do not apply here, they do not apply anywhere. If this video made you think, please like and subscribe. This is the kind of content that needs sharing to be seen. The algorithm does not push it. You do. The first hour is critical, and thank you.